On a flat stretch of rural Montana, Sheriff Paul Montoya was parked on the roadside at dawn, eating his Tuesday breakfast sandwich with coffee so strong it could strip paint. It was a habit he kept without question, the same place, the same hour, only the filling changing from week to week, as if routine itself was the only thing holding the world together. Then the sky split with white light. It was not lightning. There was no thunder, no tremor, no rush of wind. A silent beam descended at a precise angle, slowing in a way no machine should ever manage, until it hung above the eastern fields and then dropped behind the trees as though the heavens had simply closed the door. Paul sat frozen behind his cruiser, sandwich in hand, staring at the empty sky where nothing should have been. After 30 seconds of disbelief, he put the sandwich aside, called it in, and drove towards the Miller farm. The gate was open, which it should not have been. He followed the dirt track through the wheat and found the source. A pale, oval object the size of a large house, flattened like an egg and glowing softly from within. The wheat around it lay pressed in a perfect circle. No marks, no smoke, no sound, just impossible stillness. Paul rested a hand on his holstered gun and waited. Then he called his deputy, Rick, a half-awake Texan with a talent for surviving things he did not understand. When Rick arrived, jacket half on and granola bars already in his hand, he stared across the field and forgot how to finish his own sentences. They watched it. Then a line appeared down the side, top to bottom, warm gold at the edges. The object opened inward, slow and careful, like it had manners. Paul walked towards it the way one approaches a skittish animal, calm and steady, stopping at a safe distance. From the light stepped a figure 7 feet tall, pale gray, thin-limbed, with dark eyes like still water and a face without any features Paul could name. It stood in the wheat and looked at him, not threatening, not curious in any human sense, simply present. Paul did the only thing he could think of. He took off his hat and gave one slow nod. The visitor lifted a hand in reply, palm open. Rick, already on the phone with state police, watched the sheriff and the impossible thing mirror each other in the field and muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." Paul sat down in the dirt at a respectful distance. The visitors sat too, as if learning by sight rather than speech. For a while they did nothing but share the morning, the wheat, and the growing noise of radios trying to catch up with reality. Paul pointed at the crop and said, quietly, that it was wheat. He added that people made bread from it, though he suspected the visitor did not yet know what bread was. The creature's skin shimmered gently, pale as moonlight across water, and Paul realized it might have been answering him in the only language it had. Soon dust rose on the road. Then came the convoy, the helicopters, the state vehicles, and Commander Dale Reeves stepping carefully through the wheat as if entering a church. He was briefed on the way in, but the one detail that stopped him cold was not the ship, or the lights, or the fact that a sheriff had been sitting with a being from somewhere else for nearly an hour. It was that the visitor had taken off its hat first. Paul is sitting on the ground now, legs crossed, about 80 feet back from the visitor, far enough to give it space, close enough to stay in whatever this is turning into. The visitor sat down too, same way Paul was sitting, like it just picked that up from watching him, not making a big deal out of it, just getting comfortable. They're not talking. There is no way to yet. They're just sitting near each other, getting used to the fact that the other one is real. Paul thinks this might be the most important thing he has ever done in his entire life, and mostly what it involves is sitting in the dirt saying nothing. His radio has been going for 20 minutes now. State police, then other channels, voices getting louder and more urgent. The world is starting to catch up to what is happening in this field. Paul turns the volume down. The visitor looks at the sky, then back at Paul, then at the wheat around them. It reaches out and touches one of the wheat stalks with 2 fingers, very soft, and holds it for a second, looking at it the way you look at something you have never seen before but find interesting. Then it sets it down and looks back at Paul. Paul says quiet, not really expecting anything back. "Yeah, that is wheat. We make bread out of it. You probably do not know what bread is." Something happens on the visitor's skin, a soft pale shimmer, moving across it slow and gentle, like when the wind moves across the surface of a lake. There, and then gone. Paul watches that happen. He says, "Was it you answering me?" No way to know for sure, but it was looking straight at him when it happened. Paul can see the dust cloud on the road now. A long line of it. A lot of vehicles coming and coming fast. He looks at the visitor. He looks at the dust cloud. He looks back. He says, more people are coming. A lot of them. And some of them are going to be scared. He touches his chest with one hand. I'm not, he says. Not anymore. The visitor looks at him. That soft shimmer again, wider this time, moving slowly across its shoulders and all the way down both arms. Paul nods once. The dust cloud gets closer. He stays right where he is sitting. Commander Dale Reeves is in the front vehicle reading through a report when his driver tells him they are 4 minutes out. Dale asks what they know about the man in the field. The driver says local sheriff, Paul Montoya, 22 years on the job, nothing unusual about him. Dale asks if he has moved back away from the object. The driver says no sir, still in the field. Dale looks up from the paper. He says, sitting in the field with it. The driver says yes sir. Dale says alone. The driver says yes sir, and then he says the deputy told us the sheriff said it took its hat off first. Dale looks over at the driver. He says it took its hat off? The driver says, that is what the deputy told us, sir. Dale looks back out the front window at the flat land ahead, at the wheat field coming up on the right side of the road. Something that has never been to Earth before, meeting a human being for the very first time, and the first thing it did was take off its hat. Dale says quietly, all right then. The convoy spreads out in a wide line along the edge of the field. Soldiers move fast, getting into position. A helicopter comes in low and loud overhead. The quiet Tuesday morning that Paul has been sitting inside for the last hour fills up all at once with engines, boots, and radio voices. The visitor watches all of it. The color of its skin shifts. The pale gray goes a little cooler, a little more careful. Not angry, just paying close attention. The way any person would if they sat down to have a quiet conversation and suddenly 100 people showed up. Paul says under his breath, it is okay. They're just scared. Dale walks through the wheat toward Paul. He comes alone. No one with him. No weapon out. Paul notices that. He makes a note of it. That is a man worth talking to. Dale stops just behind Paul and says his name. Paul says, Commander, without turning around. Dale says he has been out here 40 minutes. Paul says, yep. Dale asks him what happened. Paul tells him, saw the light come down. Came to look. It came out about an hour ago. Dale says, and you just stayed. Paul says it did not give him a reason to leave. Dale looks past Paul at the visitor. The visitor looks back at Dale. The color on its skin goes a little cooler when their eyes meet. Careful. Watching. Dale asks why it is looking at him like that. Paul says it does that with everyone new. It looks at you for a minute and figures out what kind of person you are. Dale asks, and Paul tells him not to make any fast moves, and if he can, to relax. He says it knows when you're tense. Dale slowly rolls his shoulders down, lets his arms hang loose at his sides. It is a small thing, but the color on the visitor warms up when he does it. Not a lot, just enough. Dale says, huh? Something in the way he says it is different from how he sounded 30 seconds ago. Paul says, yeah. They stood there together for a moment. The helicopter moves off. The field goes quiet again. 80 feet away, the visitor is watching a bird that just flew across the sky above them. And then it looks back at Paul and Dale like it is checking to see if they saw it too. Dale asks what they do now. Paul looks at the visitor. The visitor looks back. Paul asks if they have someone coming who can actually talk to it. Dale says they are working on that. Paul says, then until she gets here, we do what I have been doing. Dale asks what that is. Paul says we stay. We do not crowd it. We let it know we are not going anywhere and we're not going to do anything to scare it. And we wait. Dale looks at the ship sitting there soft and quiet in the wheat. He looks at the visitor who came from the other side of the sky and is now watching two men talk like it has got all the time in the world. Dale asks if Paul thinks it is patient. Paul looks at it for a moment before he answers. He says, I think it came 4 light years to get here. Then he says, yeah, I think it is patient. Thanks for watching a video from PulseClips. Please hit that subscribe button. If you want to see part 2, don't forget to turn on notification bell. Disclaimer: the images used in this video do not accurately describe the scenes perfectly. We are aware of that, and will keep on improving on future episodes.
The field isn't quiet anymore. By 9 in the morning, there are 200 soldiers spread out along the edges of it, 3 military helicopters rotating above, 12 news vans parked 5 miles back on the main road behind a barrier, and a tent city going up on the west side of the field that has generators and satellite dishes, and people with laptops walking fast and talking into headphones. Paul is still sitting on the ground. Nobody told him to move, and he did not feel like it, so he just stayed where he was while the whole world showed up around him. Someone brought him a coffee at some point, but he does not remember saying thank you to that person. The visitor is still sitting there too, in the same spot, the same position, watching all the activities around the field the way you watch a busy street from a window. Calm, taking it all in. Its color has stayed that careful, cool gray since the convoy arrived. Not cold exactly, just steady, like someone who has walked into a room full of strangers and decided the best thing to do is be still and let people get used to them first. Dale comes back across the field and sits down next to Paul. He says, she lands in 40 minutes. Paul asks who. Dale says her name is Lena Okafor. She is a linguist, which means she studies languages for a living. She speaks 11 languages and has spent the last 3 days on a plane from Geneva, where she was working for the United Nations, and she had been on the phone with their team the entire flight, reading every report they have on the visitor so far. Paul looks at the visitor and said, 11 languages? I could bet $1,000. It does not speak any of them, Dale says. You might be right, Paul. But she is the best the government have at figuring out how to talk to something when there are no invented words yet. Paul nods his head and looked at his coffee cup, saying, tell her to come in slow. And not in a uniform. Dale, while looking at Paul, asked why. Paul replied, it watches how people carry themselves. The uniforms make it go quiet, and even gestured at his own sheriff jacket, saying even this bothered it a little at the start. She should come in wearing something plain if she has it. Dale remains quiet for a second, then says, he will pass that along. He stands up and walks back toward the tents, while Paul watches the visitor watch Dale go. Meanwhile, Lena Okafor is 32 years old, and she lands at the small airfield 12 miles away in a gray sweater and dark pants because someone radioed ahead about what Sheriff Paul said, and she had a change of clothes in her bag. She has a canvas shoulder bag that is too full, and her hair is pulled back, and she has not slept more than 3 hours. But her eyes are sharp and moving, taking in everything. A young soldier drives her to the field. She does not say much on the way. She is looking out the window at the flat land and thinking. The soldier noticed and asks if she is nervous. She replied, I'm not nervous. I'm just focused. These are different emotions. When the car stops at the edge of the field, she gets out and stands there and looks across at the visitor for the first time, staying like that for a moment without saying anything, just looking. The visitor is looking back at her. Dale walks up beside her and starts to brief her. She holds up one hand without taking her eyes off the visitor. She says, give me a minute. Dale stops talking. She stands there studying it, the height of it, the way it holds itself, the color shifting slowly across its skin, the way its eyes are tracking her, steady, not blinking the way a human would blink. Then she says, it already knows I am different from the soldiers and the sheriff. Look at the color. It went a little warmer when I got out of the car. Dale looks at the visitor. The pale gray has shifted. Just barely. Towards something lighter. He says, how did you know to look for that? She says, Sheriff Paul's report mentioned the skin changes, adding that it is the most important thing about this whole situation, and she wants to understand it before she walks out there. Dale tells her what Paul told him, about the cooler colors when there is tension, the warmer ones when things are calm, the shimmer that seems to happen when it is responding to something. She listens with her arms crossed and her eyes still on the visitor, then says, okay, and picks up her bag and starts walking across the field. Meanwhile, Dale wasn't letting her go alone. He started following her, but she quickly stopped him and said, just me. Dale stops. Paul is still sitting on the ground to the left. Lena walks past him and gives him a small nod. He nods back. She keeps walking. She stops about 50 feet from the visitor. Not as close as Paul got on his own this morning, but closer than most of the soldiers have been all day. She stands there and she looks at it, and it looks at her, and neither of them does anything for a long moment. Then Lena does something simple. She puts her hand flat against her own chest, holds it there, and says her name out loud. I am Lena. She waits. The visitor is still. She says it again. I am Lena. Same hand on her chest. The visitor tilts its head. That slow, long movement, like something thinking carefully before it responds. Then it raises its own hand and presses it flat against its own chest the way she just did. It does not make a sound, but something happens on its skin. A ripple of light starting right where its hand is touching and spreading outward, slowly across its chest and up its neck. A warm gold color moving like a slow wave. Lena stays very still, then points at it, waiting. The visitor looks at her finger pointing at it. Then it does the ripple again. Same color. Starting at the same spot, moving the same way. She pulls a small notebook out of her bag and writes something down without taking her eyes fully off it. She writes, that is its name, or the closest thing to one. She looks back up at it and says, out loud, okay. Points to herself. I am Lena. Points to it. And she waits. The gold ripple. She writes, it understands pointing. It understands the question. It is answering. She looks back at it and says, nice to meet you. Paul watches all of this from where he's sitting. Dale comes and stands beside him. They watch Lena and the visitor together, two small figures in the middle of a big flat field, one of them pointing and talking, the other one rippling gold. Paul says, she is good. Dale says, yeah, she is. Paul says, it likes her. Dale asks how he can tell. Paul says, look at the color. When I came out this morning, it was pale gray. By the time I sat down, it had started to go lighter. Right now, with her, it is the warmest it has been all day. Dale watches the visitor, the gold spreading slow and easy across its skin every time Lena speaks. He says quietly, it can feel what people are like. Paul says, I think so. He says, I think it figured out what kind of person I was inside of about 5 minutes, and after that, it just sat with me. Looking at his coffee cup, he says, I've had partners on the job I took longer to figure out than that. By midday, Lena has moved to 20 feet away. She is sitting on the ground now, cross-legged, the same way Paul sat this morning. Her notebook is in her lap. Between her and the visitor, there's a small pile of things she has brought out from her bag. A smooth rock, a leaf she picked up from the edge of the field, a piece of white paper, a pen. She holds up the rock. She says, this is a rock. She sets it down. She holds up the leaf. She says, this is a leaf. She sets it down. The visitor watches each thing with its full attention, not distracted by the helicopters that keep coming over, not looking at the soldiers along the field edge, just watching her hands and listening to her voice the way a child listens when they are genuinely interested. She holds up the pen. She thinks for a second. Then instead of saying the word, she draws a circle on the paper, a simple one. She holds it up so the visitor can see it. The visitor looks at the circle. She puts the pen down on the ground between them and pushes it gently forward toward it. The visitor looks at the pen on the ground, then at her, then back at the pen. Then very slowly it reaches out and picks the pen up. In the monitoring tent that has gone up on the west side of the field, 12 people are watching this on a live camera feed and nobody is making a sound. Someone's coffee is going cold in their hand and they have not noticed. The visitor holds the pen the way you hold something unfamiliar, looking at it from different angles, turning it over in its 4 fingers. Then it leans forward and touches the tip of it to the paper and draws a circle. Not exactly the same as Lena's, a little longer, a little more stretched. But a circle, clear and deliberate. Then under it, it draws a dot, and another dot next to that one, and another. A short row of dots in a straight line under the circle. Lena stares at the paper. She writes in her notebook, it did not just copy, it added something. It is not repeating me, it is responding. She looks up at it. It is looking right back at her. The gold color steady and warm across its whole front. She says out loud, so that the microphones around the field can pick it up, what are you showing me? It does not understand the words yet, but it taps the paper with one finger. The circle, then the dots, then it points up at the sky. She follows its finger upward. The sky, the dots, stars. She looks back down at the paper. A circle with dots underneath it. She looks at it for a long moment. Then she writes one word in her notebook and underlines it. The word is home. Inside the tent, Maya Chen has been watching the feed for 4 hours straight. She is the NASA scientist who has been on this since the signal first came in, who sat in the White House and told the president this was real, who has not slept more than a few hours in 3 days. She watches Lena point at the sky. She watches the visitor tap the paper. She picks up her radio and says, "Lena, ask it how far." Lena's voice comes back. She says, "I do not have that kind of vocabulary with it yet, Maya." "Give me time," Maya says. "Copy that." I know. They puts the radio down. She looks at the screen. At the visitor sitting in the wheat field on a Tuesday in Montana, 4 light years from wherever it started, showing a human woman a drawing of where it came from. She puts both hands flat on the desk in front of her and just breathes for a second. The young technician, Devin, who has been beside her since the beginning, says quietly, "You okay?" She says yes. He says, "You sure?" She looks at the screen, at Lena, at the visitor, at the circle with the dots under it, sitting on a piece of white paper in the middle of a field. She says, "I have been waiting for this my whole life. I just did not know it was going to feel like this." Devin asks what it feels like. Maya thinks about that for a second and says it feels like the first day of something that has no last day. By late afternoon, the whole world knows what is happening in the field. The president made the announcement at noon from the White House. She stood at the podium and said it plainly and clearly without a lot of extra words, because she is the kind of person who understands that the moment itself is big enough and does not need anything added to it. She said that a visitor from outside our solar system landed in rural Montana in the early hours of Tuesday morning. It has not been hostile, and contact is being made. The American people and the people of the world deserve to know the truth, and so she is telling them now. We do not know everything yet, but we know this. It came a long way to get here. And when it arrived, it opened its doors slowly and it raised its hand. She paused and said, "So did we." The world does not take it all one way. In Tokyo, a woman sits in a park and cries quietly, and when someone asks if she is okay, she says yes, she is happy, she just cannot believe it is real. In Lagos, a church fills up in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, and the pastor does not have a sermon ready, so he just opens the floor, and people talk for 2 hours. In a small town in Brazil, a man climbs up on his roof with binoculars and looks at the sky, even though Montana is 6,000 miles away, and there is nothing to see from a roof in Brazil. But he cannot help it. In Moscow, there is a press conference. In Beijing, there is a press conference. In London, the Prime Minister goes live and says, "This is a moment for all of humanity, not just one country, and the response must be a shared one." On social media, the word "first" trends in 47 languages inside of an hour. A 14-year-old girl in Atlanta posts a drawing she did of the visitor standing in the wheat field with its hand raised. She drew it in 20 minutes. By the end of the day, 4 million people have shared it. Back in the field, the sun is going down. The sky over Montana is going orange and then pink and then a deep blue at the edges. The wheat catches the last light and goes gold all across the field. Lena is still out there. She has been out there for 8 hours. Her notebook is almost full. She and the visitor have not solved anything today, not really, but they have started. They have a few words, a few shapes, a color that means yes, and a stillness that seems to mean uncertainty. They have the beginning of something. She is packing up her bag when the visitor does something new. It reaches out toward the piece of paper with the circle and the dots on it, picks it up, looks at it for a moment, then looks at Lena. It holds the paper out toward her, like it is giving it to her, like it wants her to keep it. She reaches out and takes it. It is just a piece of paper, a circle, a few dots, the first thing they ever made together. She holds it in both hands and looks at it for a moment. Then she looks up at the visitor. She says, "Thank you." It does not know those words yet. But the gold ripple moves across it slowly, starting at its chest and going all the way out to its fingertips, the warmest and the widest she has seen it go all day. Paul watches from across the field. Dale is beside him. They have been standing here together for the last hour without saying much. Paul says, "She did good today." Dale answered, "Yeah, she did." Paul says, "We did okay too, all things considered." Dale looks at the visitor making its way back toward the ship, slow and unhurried, the way it does everything. He says, "I called my daughter after the president's announcement, the older one, Amara." Paul says, "What did she say?" Dale says she asked if it was nice. Paul looks at the ship. He says, "What did you tell her?" Dale watches the door of the ship open slowly, and the visitors step back inside. He says, "I told her I would let her know." He pauses. He says, "But I think I already know the answer." The door closes, soft and quiet. The field goes still. The last of the orange light fades out of the sky, and the first stars come out above Montana, small and steady and very far away. Paul picks up his hat from the ground where he set it down 12 hours ago. He puts it back on his head. He says, "Same time tomorrow?" Dale, almost smiling, says, "Yeah, same time tomorrow." Thanks for watching part 2 of First. If you want to see what happens when the world starts asking bigger questions, when more of them arrive, and when Lena finally starts to understand what the visitor actually came here for, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you do not miss part 3. Share this with one person today. That is all it takes. Part 3 is coming soon. Part 3. The color of yes. The paper sits on the table inside the monitoring tent, flat under a small piece of tape so it does not move. It was a circle. 5 dots in a row underneath it. The first thing a human being and a visitor from another world ever made together. Someone puts a plastic cover over it at some point, like it was evidence at a crime scene, which in a way it is. Evidence that something happened here that has never happened before in the history of this planet. Maya has been staring at it for 20 minutes. Devin puts a coffee next to her elbow, and she does not notice. She is thinking about the dots, 5 of them, evenly spaced, in a clean, straight line under the circle. She has been thinking about them since Lena came back in with the paper last night and laid it on the table, and nobody said anything for almost a full minute. 5 dots, not 3, not 7. 5, the same way you would use your whole hand to count to 5 without thinking about it, except the visitor has 4 fingers, not 5. So 5 is deliberate. 5 means something specific. She picks up her own pen and draws the same thing on a fresh piece of paper. Circle, 5 dots. She stares at it. Then she draws it again, but this time she draws 5 circles. 1 large one in the middle, and 4 smaller ones around it. She puts her pen down and says, out loud, to nobody in particular, "Oh my goodness." Devin, stirred, looks up from his screen. She says, "It is not just showing us where it came from." She picks up the 2 drawings and holds them side by side, and says, "Look, Devin, 5 dots in a line, or 5 bodies in orbit. What if it is telling us how many worlds are in its system? What if this is a map of everything it knows?" Devin looks at the 2 pieces of paper and says, "Dr. Maya Chen, you need to show that to Lena right now." Maya is already walking out the door. Lena is in the field when Maya finds her. It is early, barely 7 in the morning, the sky still pale, and the grass wet with cold dew. She is sitting in her usual spot about 40 feet from the visitor, who is already out of the ship and already looking at her, the same way it is every morning when she arrives, like it has been waiting and is glad she is back. Maya walks across the field fast and crouches down next to Lena and holds out the 2 drawings. Lena looks at them. She looks at the original paper in her other hand. She looks at Maya. Maya explains. The 5 dots, the 5 orbits, the possibility that every line the visitor draws is a piece of information about a whole system of worlds, not just one. Lena is quiet for a moment. She looks at the visitor across the field. It is watching them both, its color a steady, calm, pale blue in the morning air. She says, "Or it could mean something else entirely, and we are 2 weeks in and still guessing." Maya says, "Yes, but it is a good guess." Lena says, "They are all good guesses. That is the problem. We have 100 good guesses and no way to check any of them yet." She looks at the drawings again, and she looks at the visitor. She says, "Let me try something today." "Give me the drawings." Maya gives it to her. The session starts at 9, same setup as the days before. Lena sitting cross-legged on the ground, the visitor across from her, the tablet and the notebook, and the growing pile of papers between them. 2 soldiers stand at the far edge of the cleared area. Dale is in the monitoring tent watching the feed. Maya is next to him. Lena holds up the original drawing, the circle and the 5 dots. She points to it and looks at the visitor. The visitor does the gold ripple. It means yes, or I made this, or I recognize it. They are still not sure exactly which one, but it always comes when the visitor is confirming something, so they have started calling it the yes color. The gold ripple is yes. Lena takes her pen and points at the circle. She draws the same circle on a new sheet of paper. Then she puts her finger on the circle in the original drawing and looks at the visitor and raises her eyebrows, which she discovered 3 days ago is a gesture it has learned to read as a question. The visitor tilts its head. Then it places one hand flat on its own chest. The gold ripple, steady and warm. Lena writes in her notebook, circle equals home, equals where it came from, equals it. She nods slowly and points at the circle again. Then she points in the direction of the ship. The visitor looks at the ship, then back at her. The gold ripple. Yes. She holds up 5 fingers. The visitor looks at her hand. She points to one finger, then draws one circle on the paper. She points to a second finger, draws a second circle next to it. Third finger, third circle. She keeps going until she has 5 circles on the paper, side by side. She holds the paper up. The visitor looks at it for a long moment. Then it reaches out and takes the pen from her hand, which it has started doing without hesitating, and it draws a line through 4 of the circles. Not aggressive, not scratching them out, just a quiet line through them, like crossing names off a list. Then it points to the one circle that still has no line through it and does the gold ripple. The monitoring tent goes completely silent. Lena does not move. She looks at the paper. 4 circles with lines through them. One circle untouched, she says quietly. Into the small microphone clipped to her collar. Are you getting this? Maya says, we are getting this. Lena says, 4 gone. 1 left. She looks up at the visitor. Its color is not gold anymore. The ripple has faded. What is there now is that quiet, still gray blue she first saw when she said the word home, and it went sad on her. The color it goes when something is heavy. She looks at it for a moment, and she does something she has not planned. She reaches out slowly, giving it every chance to move back if it wants to, and she places her hand flat on the paper, right next to the 5 circles, right next to the 4 with lines through them and the one that is left. She just rests her hand there. She does not say anything. The visitor looks at her hand on the paper, then at her face. Then it places its own hand down on the other side of the paper, mirroring hers, its 4 long fingers spread flat on the white surface. They sit like that. In the tent, Dale says nothing. Maya says nothing. Devin has both hands over his mouth. Outside in the field, 2 hands rest on opposite sides of a piece of paper, one with 5 fingers and one with 4, and between them, a drawing of 4 dead worlds and one that is still going. Commander Dale Reeves calls his older daughter Amara at lunchtime, sitting in his Jeep with the door open and his boots on the ground outside, and the Montana sky going white and flat above him the way it does when the weather is thinking about changing. Amara is 17 and in her junior year, and she has been texting him every day since this started, short messages, just checking in, which is something she has never done before and which he notices. She picks up on the second ring and asks how it is going. He tells her it is going. She asks what that means. He says it means he does not have the words for most of it yet. He says it is one of those things where you are inside it and everything is moving and you cannot really explain it until you are on the other side looking back. She asks if it is scared. He says no. He says that is the thing. It is not scared at all. He says, you know how some people walk into a room and you can just tell right away that they are okay. They are not going to do anything. They are just present. It's exactly like that. She is quiet for a second. Then she says, Dad, Pia drew another picture of it. He asks what this one looks like. Amara says, she drew it sitting down in the field, and she drew you and the sheriff sitting next to it. He looks out at the field from where he is parked, at the tent, at the distant shape of the visitor moving slowly through the wheat in the afternoon light while Lena walks beside it pointing at things. He says, tell her the drawing is good. Amara says, she wants to know if you will bring home something from there, like a souvenir. Dale almost laughs, not quite, but close. He says, I do not think it works like that, baby. Amara says, I know. She was just asking. He watches Lena crouch down and pick up a stone and hold it up toward the visitor. The visitor looks at the stone. Its color goes a curious pale gold. Dale says, hey, I love you. Tell your sister I love her too. Amara says, I will. She says, Dad? He says, yeah. She says, I'm glad you are the one who is there. I'm glad it is you. He sits with that for a moment. He says, me too, baby. Me too. The moment everyone later calls, the wheat walk happens on day 16, and nobody planned it. Lena is walking the visitor slowly around the cleared area the way she sometimes does in the afternoons, both of them moving at the same pace, her pointing at things and naming them, the visitor watching and responding with colors. This has become a daily thing, a walking vocabulary lesson. She points at the sky and says sky. She points at the ground and says ground. She points at her shoe and says shoe, and it goes a brief curious color, and she writes it down. They reach the edge of the cleared area, the boundary where the pressed flat circle of ground ends and the wheat begins, where Paul first sat down all those days ago. Lena stops. The visitor keeps walking. It walks 3 steps into the wheat and then turns and looks at her. She looks at Dale, who is standing 20 feet behind her. Dale looks at the visitor standing in the wheat, then looks at Lena. He gives a very small nod. Lena steps into the wheat.
Behind her, she can hear the quiet sound of soldiers shifting, adjusting, becoming alert. Dale's voice, low and steady, saying, "Hold, just hold, nobody moves." The visitor watches her come. When she is standing beside it in the wheat, it turns and keeps walking slowly. She walks with it. They walk together through the wheat field, side by side, the wheat coming up to Lena's waist and brushing the visitor's knees, the sun going low and orange ahead of them. The visitor reaches out and touches the tops of the wheat stalks as it passes them, dragging its long fingers through the grain the way a person drags their hand along a fence. Lena does the same thing. They walk for about 4 minutes. Not far. Not fast. Just 2 very different creatures walking through a field in Montana in the late afternoon, touching the same wheat. When they turn back toward the camp, Lena looks over at it. She says, "Did you have fields where you came from?" No answer, of course. No way to answer that yet. But its color, slow and steady, goes a deep, warm amber. The color of last light. The color she has come to understand means something like memory, or something like longing, or maybe just something like beauty. She is not totally sure yet which one it is, and she is not in a hurry to decide, because deciding too fast is the thing that gets you wrong. She just walks beside it. Maya is on the phone with Dr. Frank Adler at 9 in the evening, sitting on the hood of a truck outside the tent with her jacket zipped and the stars overhead, and they are arguing again the way they always argue. Not mean. Just 2 people who see things differently and have never stopped pushing on that. Adler says the scientific community needs more. He says the drawings are remarkable, the color communication is remarkable, but the world is asking questions they cannot answer yet. What does it eat? How does it breathe? What is the ship made of? Where exactly are the 4 worlds? How many of them are out there beyond this one visitor? He says, "Maya, we have been in contact for 16 days and we still do not know the most basic things." Maya says, "Frank, the most basic things are the hardest ones." She says, "We know it is not aggressive. We know it is intelligent. We know it came here from a dying system and it sat in a field for 2 weeks waiting for us to be ready to talk to it." She says, "Those are not small things. Those are the most important things." Adler says he is not disagreeing. He says the pressure from above is increasing. People want answers. Governments want assessments. The scientific community wants data that can be peer-reviewed. Maya says, "You cannot peer-review a relationship." Adler goes quiet. She says, "That is what this is. Whether we meant it to be or not, that is what this is. And you cannot rush it. You rush it and you break it, and if we break this, we do not get another one." He says, "Maya." She says, "Frank." He says, I know you are right. Just give me something I can take to them. Something concrete." She looks up at the stars. At Proxima Centauri somewhere up there, 4 light years away, invisible to the eye, but she knows exactly where it is. She says, "Tomorrow. Give me tomorrow, and I will have something for you." She hangs up. She stays on the hood of the truck for a while, looking at the field. The ship glows softly at the far end of it, pale white in the dark, quiet as a sleeping thing. She says to no one, just out loud into the Montana night, "We are doing fine. We are doing just fine." The field does not answer, but it does not disagree either. The something concrete happens the next morning, and it is Lena who makes it happen the way Lena always makes things happen, by sitting still and paying attention long enough for the visitor to show her what it wants her to see. She comes to the session with a new tablet, a better one, that can display images cleanly. She has loaded it with photographs, not random ones. She has spent the night choosing carefully. Simple things, a seed, a mountain, an ocean, a city at night, a child's face, a fire, the sun, the moon, a flower opening in time-lapse, a star going supernova. She starts at the beginning, holds up the tablet, shows the visitor a photograph of the sun. The visitor goes gold immediately, bright and fast. The brightest yes color Lena has seen since the first day. She writes, "Sun, strong positive response, familiar." She shows it a photograph of the ocean. The visitor tilts its head. The color goes a neutral, curious gray. Not positive, not negative. Just interested. Like seeing something it does not recognize but wants to understand. She writes, "Ocean, uncertain. Possibly no oceans where it is from." She shows it the city at night. Something interesting happens. The visitor leans forward. Not much, just slightly. Its color goes a complex shifting pattern she has not seen before. Blues and whites and a quick ripple of gold, and then back to blue. It looks at the image for longer than it has looked at any other image today. She holds the tablet still and lets it look. After about 30 seconds, it reaches out and touches the screen with one finger. The lights in the photograph of the city. The little bright dots of 10 million windows glowing in the dark. It looks at her. Then it looks at the ship. Then back at the photograph of the city. Lena writes in her notebook, her hand moving fast. Recognizes artificial light. Recognizes a civilization. Knows it is looking at a place where people live. She looks up at it. She says, "You know what that is, don't you?" The gold ripple. Wide and warm. Yes. She puts the tablet down and picks up her pen. She draws a circle on the paper. She points to it and looks at the visitor. It gives her the gold ripple. She draws a second circle next to it and draws little dots inside both of them, like lights in a city. She points to the first circle. She points to herself. She points to the second circle. She points to the visitor. Two worlds, both full of lights, both full of people living in them. The visitor looks at the drawing. Then it takes the pen, very gently, from her hand. It draws a line between the two circles. Not through them, not crossing them out. A line connecting them. Then it draws a small shape at each end of the line. One at the human circle end. One at its circle end. Two small marks facing each other across the line. Lena stares at the drawing. Two worlds. A line between them. One figure at each end. She looks up at it. She says, "That is us." The visitor holds still for one moment. Then from its feet all the way up to the top of its head, slowly and completely, it goes gold. The whole of it. All at once. The warmest and the fullest gold she has ever seen, like standing next to the sun. Not a ripple this time. Not a pulse. Just steady. Just entirely, completely gold. In the monitoring tent, Maya puts both hands flat on the desk and presses down hard because she needs something solid right now. Devin says, "That is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Dale is standing at the entrance to the tent with his arms crossed. He watches the gold light coming off the visitor through the camera feed. He thinks about Amara asking him if it is nice. He thinks about the amber pulse that answered him the morning he talked to it alone. He uncrosses his arms. He walks out of the tent and across the field, and he stops about 20 feet behind Lena. He looks at the visitor. The visitor looks back at Dale. And this time, for the first time, its color does not go cooler when their eyes meet. It stays gold. All of it, steady and warm. Dale nods at it. The visitor raises one hand, palm out. Dale raises his hand back. Paul's voice comes from beside him. Paul, who has been standing there the whole time, who Dale did not even notice walking up. Paul says, "There it is." Dale says, "Yeah." He says it quiet. He says it like a man who has been waiting to be sure of something and has finally gotten there. He says, "There it is." That's all for part 3. Part 4 is where things get more complicated. The world outside the field starts pushing in. Someone leaks something they should not have. And for the first time, the visitor shows them something about its home that changes everything they thought they understood about why it came. Subscribe for part 4. Turn your notifications on so you do not miss what comes next. Part 4 is coming.